So the second element of our story elements videos, well, we're going to do 2 and 3 together. Character and setting. So this is our interactive notebook element. It is a flap. So you're going to write these words on top of it, but then the notes that I show on the next slide, I want you to write on your notebook paper, and you're going to glue this underneath. You're going to cut to this line so you can fold it up. So make sure that you leave 2 lines about, because that's how wide these boxes are. Leave 2 lines to glue so you don't accidentally glue on top of your notes. That would be bad. Okay? Alright, so first thing, we're combining elements 2 and 3. So the second element of story elements is character. Character is who the story is about. We often have, we have a main character, but we'll often have a whole cast of characters. We have a bunch of different ones. So we have these different types of characters in them. If your notes don't include this, make sure you write these words: flat, round, static, and dynamic. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the notes underneath the flap. Our third element is called setting, and that is where the story happens, where in time, where in the world, or in a fictional world, like the place, time in the year, because those all influence different things that can happen in the story, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then we have this part. It's not really like a story element, but it's how the author gives us information. And so I just wanted to discuss it. There's 2 ways: directly and indirectly. Notice that they both go from A to B, but one gets there faster and one gets there kind of like, takes a while. So we want to make sure that we can recognize both ways that the author is giving us information about our characters and our setting. So here we go to the notes underneath the flap. So characters. There are 4 different types of characters I'm going to talk about. First is flat. A flat character has one trait. They just are one thing, like for the whole story. For example, Cruella de Vil in 101 Dalmatians. She's only cruel. She's never nice. She never does anything for any other reason than selfishly, so she's a flat character. There's not a lot to her. Round characters are characters that have multiple traits and multiple motivations and why they do different things. Maybe they are rude to someone and then they are kind to another person. And it's not for selfish reasons. Maybe sometimes they are selfish, sometimes they are really selfless. So sometimes they're just harder to tell and figure out. So those are round characters. They have some complexity and depth to them. A static character doesn't change. This is somebody who, beginning to end, exactly the same. So typically, flat characters are static, like Cruella de Vil. She's evil in the beginning, she's evil at the end. But we can also have round characters who are static, who are the same at the beginning as they are at the end. Maybe we have like the grumpy old man who lives on the corner, who's really kind of nice if you got to know him. He's still the grumpy old man who lives on the corner and is nice when you get to know him at the end of the book too. He doesn't change, but maybe our main character does, which means that this main character is going to be dynamic. A dynamic character is somebody who does change or grow, and typically they're going to be round characters. So in our pretend scenario with the grumpy old man on the corner, maybe our main character starts out being really afraid of the grumpy old man on the corner, and by the end of the story loves the old man on the corner because they've gotten to know him. And now their motivation for being around him is different, and so they have grown and changed and become more mature. Okay. In our notes underneath setting, setting is pretty straightforward. It's when in time and in the year and where in like location. This could be like our world, this could be a fantasy world. These things determine our story limits. So for example, if you have a story at Hogwarts but then you don't have any magic, that's not going to work because Hogwarts is a magical school. So we want to make sure that we're looking for those things paying attention to the hints that our author gives us, sometimes they don't tell us where the story is located. We figure it out based on like what buildings our characters are walking by, or the kind of weather that they're experiencing, or the kind of clothes that they're wearing. So that information sometimes isn't given to us. We're not told like this story is set in the 1800s, but we can figure it out based off of what they're wearing or what kinds of vehicles they're riding in, that kind of thing. So that leads us to our third thing, our direct and indirect characterization / description. So direct characterization and description is when the author just gives us information. For example, in Percy Jackson, Percy just tells us, I am a demigod. We don't have to watch him do some crazy things that he shouldn't be able to do before we figure out that he's a demigod. He just tells it to us. An indirect, and then the other way is the indirect characterization. An indirect characterization or description is when the author shows us something and we have to figure out what they're telling us by it. For example, we have the boy walked quietly into the room alone. Well, the words quietly and alone could tell us that this boy is shy and maybe he doesn't have a lot of friends. He could be really lonely. So the author doesn't tell us, but he or she shows us this information, and then we figure out what they want us to know based off of that. If you have any other questions, make sure that you come talk to me, and make sure that you get your glue in from the crate in the box. In the room, sorry.